Welcome everybody on Facebook. This is Steve Barrett, PR Week Editor-in-Chief. We're about to film our weekly podcast. Great guest this week, Rob Flaherty from Ketchum. Welcome, Rob. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much.
As we're on live and you can see Rob, you can see why he sometimes gets mistaken for Mayor de Blasio, don't you?
Yes.
Around and about New York. People stand to attention. I'm sure it's for your own personal presence and your role, but also because they think the mayor's around, which is always good fun. I've seen it happen in restaurants.
That's right.
It's really good fun.
Have you ever used it to get out of a traffic ticket? Or
No, I promised our Chief Communications Officer I'd never play along. As tempting as it is to consider, cops, people on the subway asking for selfies, and I promised I wouldn't because, I'll end up on the front page of the Post being misunderstood, getting into an Uber or something.
Yeah, but it's a lot of fun. Saw it happening in an Italian restaurant once. And we got Frank Washkook, our news editor, as usual. Hey, Frank.
Thank you for having me.
So if you have any questions, comments, do let us know. But otherwise, we will get into the show. Hello and welcome to the PR Week, PR Week's regular weekly roundup of everything that matters in the worlds of PR and communications. My name's Steve Barrett. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of PR Week. Going to guide you through the next 20, maybe 25 minutes. And as we review another busy week, plenty to write about, plenty to talk about in the world of PR and communications. And we're joined by a fantastic special guest, Rob Flaherty, who's worldwide President and CEO of Ketchum. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
It's good to have you here and looking forward to chatting. And Frank Washkook is our news editor. Hey Frank, how are you?
Happy to be here.
Another good week at PR Week Towers?
Another good week, thank you.
Yeah, broke some good stories, done some good content this week.
Some good stuff for sure.
There is nothing, there's a lot to write about and we'll get into some of those things. We'll talk to Rob and find out about how the year was 2016 and trends in 2017. Agency world is changing all the time, and Rob's obviously at the pinnacle of those changes over at Ketchum, running a global shop there. We'll talk about IBM, one of Rob's clients, but they've had some changes in their comms function. Edelman hired an interesting new tech lead over on the West Coast, Natalie Carriers. We'll talk about Snapchat, or Snap, because they are doing a bit of a tour prior to their IPO. What is the real value of that business? And Pinterest did a really interesting newsmaker with Barry Schnitt, their head of comms over there. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about fake news. Couldn't really do a podcast without talking about fake news. There was an interesting event last night at the Arthur Page Centre that Rob was at, and so we'll pick up on those topics. And anything else that grabs our attention. But Rob, let's start with you. 2016, we saw the Omnicom full-year financial results look pretty good, actually.
Yeah, right.
And that's not always the case. And sometimes, with Omnicom, there's lots of businesses rolled into that division, and you don't know which bits are contributing. But talk us through the year from your point of view, and what were the highlights and trends that you were seeing?
Well, I'm toward the end of my 5th year as CEO of Ketchum.
5 years already.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It is, actually.
It's unbelievable. And it was one of my favorite in terms of the progress that we made in our performance. Solid growth, and a few of the things that really stand out to me. We're fortunate at Ketchum, we've had a track record of kind of being able to say it was a record new business year for several years now, meaning the revenue that we brought in was more than the year before. I think one of the things I'm most happy about in 2016 is that of our top 40 clients, 35 of them grew, 5 of them declined, but not by much at all as budgets go up and down. Retained all of them, and 15 of them grew by more than $1 million. So,
do you count that as organic new business growth?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have 2 ways of thinking of new business. The combined new business number is both incremental growth of existing clients and new business, brand new clients coming in, and it's about half and half every year. But to be a healthy company and to grow, you got to do both. It's not great if you win a ton of new business, but you lost more than that out the back door. And similarly, it's great and more important to keep your clients happy, and those are growing. But if you're not bringing in new brands, then you're not rejuvenating your client portfolio and getting some of the most exciting companies out there today. So I was really glad to combine both of those things.
And what were can you pick out a couple, maybe one new and one existing client that, particularly grew?
Yeah, well, new clients, thrilled to have added Amazon to our client roster, Amazon Fashion. AARP was a big one in Washington.
Amazon's on fire, isn't it? It's almost taken over Seattle and now it's moving into other cities. I think they employ 45,000 people in Seattle, and now they're in Chicago and gradually affecting the economy in the same way as Google and Facebook have.
Yeah, and it's really neat to work in the fashion part of it because as they move from things that are easier to buy online to things you have to try on, it's amazing what they're doing there, how they're going to revolutionize the future of shopping for apparel. Also, one that is a huge challenge for all developed nations right now, in the category of the opiate addiction crisis, Adapt Pharma became a client. They're the makers of Narcan, which is the antidote to heroin or any opioid overdose.
Yeah, we did a piece on that.
Yeah,
one actually.
And it's
a big problem. It doesn't probably get as much, we've talked about this before, it doesn't get as much publicity as maybe it should. We've seen sort of quite striking images of parents unconscious in cars with kids in the back, and that kind of brings it home to people. But the scale of the opioid epidemic and cheap heroin is really, really terrible problem for the country.
Yeah, in addition to doing work for the pharmaceutical company that makes the antidote, I would be interested in some kind of industry-wide initiative to address it on a pro bono basis. Yeah. I think it's unbelievable. Every week you see a new town or state that is publicly saying, please help. The latest one last week in Louisville, Kentucky, just the numbers are staggering how many people are dying there.
And that campaign is shortlisted in the PR Week Awards.
Is it?
Narcan, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
we expanded, one that we expanded, we're very proud of, is Hyundai. Hyundai, the car company, we've worked with them for many years now, and we've expanded into the Genesis line of cars. Really proud of that. 7-Eleven.
Just on Hyundai, I mean, how do you approach a foreign car company, quite a political industry at the moment with all the focus on jobs, and all global auto manufacturers, they're in every country, so they have to address that in every country as well. How do you sort of approach that? Does that roll into your business with them?
Yeah, it's always on the radar. I mean, first off, they were a huge beneficiary during the 07, 08, 09 decline of domestic manufacturers. They were the fastest growing car company at that time. They're doing very well now, and they manufacture here, and so there hasn't been that kind of polarization around the issue that I've seen.
Tell us a bit about, we had Karen Van Bergen as a guest on the podcast, and it's 1 year, I think, Karen's been in that role. How has that changed things over at Ketchum, or generally in the way you go to market as a group?
Well, a really big one that was a real highlight that we got out of the OPRG structure was that we had one of our senior people depart who ran our change management business called Ketchum Change. Mm-hmm. And I worked with Karen Van Bergen and OPRG to look at solutions there. That for us is a big differentiator. It isn't just really smart internal communications people. It is real change management consultants with advanced degrees in organizational change, organizational psychology, and we wanted to keep it that way. So I wasn't looking for a communications leader, and so she approached me and said, within Omnicom we have Daggerwing, which is a very successful management consultancy that's very C-suite related to change management on creating alignment, particularly at the C-suite level, and providing strategy, a little less on the employee engagement end of things. And she said, what if we merge that into Ketchum? You could rebrand your firm Daggerwing. We had been looking at liberating the change management unit from our brand so that it had permission to go beyond public relations clients to change management and management consulting clients. So we were deep into a brand change exercise when she approached me about this. And in December, it became part of Ketchum. Ewan Main, who comes classically out of management consulting, is the CEO. We now have 125 people, in change management and employee engagement, and I love it as a differentiator
So
for
will
Ketchum.
that stay under the Ketchum revenue
Yes.
umbrella? Okay, that's great. So,
Yeah.
so you'll be going up against the McKinseys, the Accentures, rather than the other way around, which is
Yeah, and I don't want to overstate it, and nor would you, but you know, our sweet spot is really the intersection with the customer and with brand. So you know what, I think it's pretty bizarre that the marketing communications industry is always so focused on the creative external promise. Advertising is about, here's the promise of our brand. Public relations is about, you know, a pull marketing exercise, come experience our brand. We're not focused enough on making that brand a reality through the experience, you know, the training of employees, the pivot from one mission to another and what it means internally to actually deliver that. So I'm really happy to bring this to our clients.
How much more often are you working with other Omnicom firms?
We work with them all the time, but we're pretty agnostic. You know, we work with WPP advertising agencies, IPG advertising agencies. The center of gravity for us is the client. Who do they want to work with, and who do they want us to work with? What we focus more on, less about kind of controlling that mix, and more about having a culture in which we work well with others, either in the lead position or when another agency is more in the lead position. I think it's a cultural thing to be able to work well in that sandbox.
Is MMK Plus is the sort of offer for P&G. Did that grow in, because there was a lot of reorganisation of that, the P&G work across the board last year. How did Ketchum come out of that?
Very well. We did do very well, and I'll say that sometimes our brand is sometimes subsumed under MMK Plus.
Because it's not KMN.
Yeah, right. But we love working with Marina Mar Communications on MMK, and the Plus is other firms that are in it also. We did very well in that kind of realignment of agencies. Very proud of the relationship with P&G. And P&G really liked the OPRG construct because we had created that on a bespoke basis for P&G, but now we're working together even more collaboratively through OPRG.
So we've seen, looking forward, we've seen some interesting stories recently. Ogilvy is kind of folding all their disciplines into one basket. If you look at Publicis, they're increasingly folding their offer, and MSL being a part of that, an integrated offer. You hear a lot more about holding company pitches, and clients are kind of asking for that. You've seen WPP now have a horizontal health offer across, branded to WPP, which I think is a first. How do you see the agency world progressing in 2017 in that context? You know, how's it going to change your business especially?
Yeah, well, I'll unpack that a little bit. There's a lot of questions in there. First, on the Ogilvy thing, it's going to be amazing to watch that because they did two gigantically disruptive things at once. My understanding, and I may be wrong about this, is not only did they eliminate or consolidate the disciplines, PR, social, digital, advertising, and kind of eliminate the clear delineation of those as individual units. But if I'm right, they eliminated geographic profit centers. I don't know, is that?
It's one P&L.
Yeah, one. I thought it meant one P&L by discipline, but if it's also one P&L by geography, either one of those would have profound unintended consequences. And when you do them both together, it's extraordinary.
Good or a bad one?
Well, you know, every one of us wants to make our firms borderless to serve the client in a way that doesn't have much regard for where it comes from. That's the good side. The challenging side is I do worry about whether the PR part somehow gets subordinated more under that construct. And also, when you do collapse under one geographic P&L, the question becomes, do each of those nodes of the network have enough entrepreneurial incentive to do really well to support a firm that is that vast? And does it give, you know, high potential rising stars within the company enough of a sense of what they own? You know, there's always been a reason why we kept the double-edged sword profit center in place. Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to watch.
I mean, in theory, it gets rid of all this sort of regional, well, I want that piece of work because it's, you know, because it goes toward my bonus, and you, in theory, get the best people on the job.
Yeah.
I would imagine, though, there are going to be more client conflicts, you know, that are going to be a little bit difficult to navigate.
Well, the other thing is, it's not a majority of clients who want a one-stop shop.
Still, you're still seeing that.
Oh yeah, you know, there are many that want a really good integration, but they actually want each discipline to be kind of proudly standing up for their discipline, because we all have huge strengths. And I'm not sure they want us to just quickly get in line behind each other. And they also like second and third source of supply, so there's some healthy tension and competition going on. So I would think it's kind of a minority of clients that actually say, great, one brand, vertically integrated.
Yeah, there's plenty to watch in 2017. And let's get into the news, Frank. Some changes over at IBM, one of Ketchum's biggest clients. Talk us through that.
That's right. So after less than a year in the role, Andy Whitehouse is out as the Chief Communications Officer over at IBM. And so with him and Jeff DeMarias also leaving at about the same time, and they were brought on at about the same time, that means that John Iwata is going to be spending more time with the individual communications teams over at IBM. So one that we're going to keep watching there.
Rob, can you shed any light on that? Has been one of your clients?
Yeah, well, first off, we've loved a more than 20-year relationship with IBM. And John and Ed Barbini and Steve Tomasco and the leaders over there run one of the best communications functions in the world. And they will continue to do extremely well. I loved working with Andy. Andy's going to do great in his next chapter with his advanced degrees from Oxford and the Kennedy School of Government and Public Policy. He's got a phenomenal brain, and we'll be eager to see his next chapter. But, you know, IBM and its Watson franchise are some of the proudest work that we do. And you see that...
Is Watson going to take over as CCO?
Watson is taking over a lot of things, right?
It's true.
And being of great value. And I'm particularly excited the work that they're doing in our industry. You know, that we now have IBM Watson artificial intelligence enabled platforms at Ketchum to identify and track influencers through, for example, a company like Tap Influence that is a partnership with IBM. And I look forward to far more ways that, you know, Watson is deep Q&A technology where you can say, quick, I need to reach 14-year-old boys in the online gaming community. What are they talking about right now? What are the big events that are coming up right now? What channels are most relevant to them? Bam. I mean, think about that on your smartphone in our industry.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about crunching data, that's the biggest data crunching sort of potential you've got out there, isn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, if you look at the ad agency or the agency league tables out there, IBM is now kind of top of them, isn't it? 'Cause it's bought a couple of ad agencies, it's bought various other sort of units. So, are they a frenemy? Are they sort of competing with you?
You know what? Frankly, I think what they've done is a data, centric play at a time when marketing is moving to a very data centric play. But they would be more frequently a competitor with big digital shops.
Yeah.
You know, and media shops, media buying. You know, so you get programmatic media buying, the data heavy end of the spectrum. And as we move more and more into data, which is a big movement within Ketchum, we're still not in the sweet spot that they're in of huge scale data play in marketing.
Yeah, and interesting that David Kenny, who used to run Digitas, is actually over there running the Watson business.
That's right.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Frank, tell us about Snap. There's been lots of rumours about an IPO over there. Snapchat's been one of the trendiest and most used social platforms, hasn't it? What's happening over
They're
there?
moving in that direction, and they filed SEC paperwork a few weeks ago to go forward with an IPO. It raised a lot of skepticism when they did that because they are running very heavy losses for the past 2 years.
Because as part of doing that, they have to actually lift the kimono a little bit and unveil some numbers. Yeah?
Yes. Not as much as you would see in a typical earnings report, but it gives you a good peek into what kind of business they're doing. User growth has slowed a bit at Snapchat, and so in the roadshow that they've been doing, they've reportedly been getting a lot of tough questions from potential investors this week. It's interesting. One of the first thoughts I had when I looked at the numbers that they put out was that they were awfully familiar in a lot of ways to Twitter's pre-IPO numbers, which I'm sure, given the way that Twitter has performed financially over the past few years, would give a lot of people pause. So that's going to be something to watch going forward, whether investors get on board, whether it's more like the Twitter IPO or the Facebook IPO, or even something like the Alibaba IPO. It's still on track to be one of the biggest technology IPOs in history, the biggest one in the US in a couple of years. So really interesting company, and one that marketers are obviously very focused on.
Yeah, I think we all love Twitter, but the fact is it doesn't make any money yet, does it? So I guess, Rob, it's a question of is Snap going to be the new Twitter or the new Facebook? Have you got a view on that from sort of your agency perspective and using it with clients as a platform?
Well, the question always is growth of users, and is it already starting to reach the top of the bubble? And who knows whether their IPO is valued at 20 to 25 billion or 15 to 20 billion. I'm not going to feel too bad for them. I know that we're incorporating into a lot of our programming, both on the paid side and on the earned organic side, and it is super relevant depending on the demographic you're trying to reach.
Yeah, very, very popular.
When you say depending on the demographic, not just young people, I mean, are your clients looking for something very specific when they go on Snapchat?
Well, it's engagement with the people who are, the bulk of the users there. So it does tend to be brands that are younger, aimed at a younger demographic right now. But just like Twitter and Facebook, it migrates up very fast.
Frank, next story. Edelman has had a few tech leads over the last few years, hasn't it? And a few West Coast leaders as well in their offices over there. But they've made a really interesting appointment today. Natalie Kerris, who used to actually run comms at Twitter, talk us through that.
That's right. She was at Twitter for about 6 months last year as their head of comms. She replaced Gabriel Stricker, who left about a year before that. And previously, she was at Apple for 14 or 15 years. So she had a very long tenure at Apple before a short tenure at Twitter. She was in the second level under longtime comms head at Apple, Katie Cotton, for a long time. So she has a really interesting pedigree in terms of the companies she has worked for in Silicon Valley. She's reporting up to Kim White at Edelman, who is the sector's head.
Okay, so that's interesting. She probably left around the time when Steve Dowling got the top job at Apple. Maybe she
left 5 days later.
Okay, right.
So, yes, you could say that.
Draw the conclusions from that, but a great person to bring over to the agency side.
Sure.
And, from your point of view, Rob, the West Coast, very different market, isn't it, to the East Coast tech market?
Yeah.
It's a lot harder for the big agencies to really make their mark there, and there's a lot of funky sort of startups, but then some of the tech specialists like Tex 100, who you work with on IBM. What's your approach, and what are you seeing on the West Coast market?
Well, just like when you see Edelman hiring someone from Apple and Twitter, how interesting how technology, the tech practice has changed. It's not even hardware and software now. It is platforms that are most appealing, and the influence or pervasiveness of tech in everything. So Access Emanate, one of our plays in that space, becomes kind of a tech in everything play, as it is across all of Ketchum. It's more interesting how tech is playing out in all those other companies than just going after the now more narrow slice of deep tech or hardware software. Yeah. So I think that hire and many that we've made are similarly aiming at the broad, much more interesting world of tech today.
Sure. Let's quickly talk about Pinterest, because I did a newsmaker with Barry Schnitt talking of that world, and Barry has worked at Google, head of comms, and then went to Facebook as head of comms, and I don't know for certain, but I think he did pretty well out of those 2 gigs, and then he went to Pinterest as their 30th employee, so he's probably going to do quite well out of that too. And the annoying thing is, he's a really nice guy, so he's obviously got a great pedigree. And the piece sort of looks at how he set up the comms function. That was the attraction for him. He was able to set up something from scratch at a really interesting startup at the time, which has now developed. And talking to him, the interesting thing about Pinterest was that most of the tech startups, like Twitter or like Facebook, start on the coasts. They're on the East or West Coast. They're a certain elite, the tech elite or whatever. Pinterest was really more Midwest and more women, so it was setting up boards for different interests, fashion, beauty, housewares, and home improvement, etc. And it's kind of grown in a different way to a lot of the other big social platforms. So it's an interesting piece to hear that story. Very iconic founders as well, which Barry rates up there with the Zuckerbergs and the Google guys. So,
I thought it was interesting, if I read your story right, he's a self-proclaimed introvert, and he said the founders are also, and that they kind of needed to work on how to talk to the press and how to get used to it.
Definitely the founders, yeah. Ben Silberman, was one of these super intelligent guys, and his question to Barry was, why do we need to talk to the New York Times? And Barry's like, well, if you're going to meet your goals, that's a really good way, as you will know. That's a really good way to hit a great audience, across the board. So he had to do an education process with the founders, but he also found that some of the ideas that Ben had, for example, the first press conference they'd never done one before. Ben suggested inviting users to the press conference, and Barry was like, "Well, hang on, we don't want we'd never do that at Facebook," but they did it, and actually they were so enthusiastic about the platform that they really kind of infected the media guys with their enthusiasm, which, as you know, is not always easy to do.
Right,
So we're such a cynical bunch, and now they do it at every one of their events. So it was a great mix and a really interesting story. And they've got things like their Pinterest 100, which is their 100 trends looking forward that they see on their platform. So yeah, it's an interesting story.
It reminds me that one of the biggest developments over the past year at Ketchum is our deep dive into influencers and influencer platforms. We're training dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of people in some of the new platforms. We did a global RFP because we realized we were working with 40 different influencer platforms, and we narrowed it down to 4 or 5 best-in-class ones that are going to give us global reach, economies of scale, and now we're pretty intensely training people on them. My take on that is such a fast-growing marketplace. It'll be interesting to watch. But like CRM 25 years ago, kind of stole a chunk of our business and is now a larger category than public relations. It'll be interesting to see. These influencer platforms, A, we should have a very significant slice of the pie and foothold in them. B, that business might be as big as our entire business.
So what do you mean by influencer platform?
Yeah. Well, if you look at companies like Tubular Labs, Tap Influence, Tracker, some of the platforms that are aggregators and gateways to influencers. Okay. And Ann Wool is now the head of Ketchum Influencer Marketing, in addition to being president of Ketchum Sports and Entertainment. Yeah. But, and somewhat born out of that, accessing like entertainment influencers. But if you look at those companies, she likes to say there are unpaid influencers, right, which we've been in for forever. There are hybrid paid and sometimes unpaid, and there are paid-only influencers, which have created this cottage industry of people who became YouTube stars, Vine stars, that kind of thing. But they also extended it breast cancer survivors, nutritionists, fitness instructors. Well, these aggregators are now contracting with them. And in some cases they get products, in some cases they get couponing and deals, in other cases they get paid. So it's a fascinating moment, because if an ad agency goes into this and they think of it as a channel to buy, I would predict they're going to run into some disclosure issues. You could have a lot of consumers who don't know it was just a paid channel. In our world, we always have to be looking out for the ethics and the delineation between a paid influencer and an unpaid influencer. So the training needs to be intense, but it is big business.
Yeah.
There's some of these YouTube stars that are appeal to millions of people, but nonetheless a niche within an interest category, are getting paid $200,000 and $300,000 a day, to speak on behalf of a brand or just to interact with the brand. It's just extraordinary explosion, and we have to be on top of it. And I also think, as a smart earned play or hybrid paid earned play, it's ideal for us as a pull marketing vehicle.
That's interesting stuff, something we talk about a lot, but not so much the platforms. That's something we should dig into a bit more. Look, we've run out of time, but let's just a quick word on fake news, because we were at that Arthur Page event last night where they were honouring Alan Murray and Dick Martin, and there was a lot of talk in the room, wasn't there, about ethics, integrity, and about the need now to support the media from the PR professional's point of view. Just a quick couple of outtakes from you, Rob, on what you heard.
Well, how timely for there to be an award for integrity in public communications, and Ann Barkaloo being the third one from Fleischman. And, I thought there was a lot of really smart thinking from all three of the honorees about why this is so important. And one of the things that we've been talking about a lot at Ketchum is we have to start investing in media literacy. If we've learned anything from the past year, it's that a somewhat concerning cut of the population in a lot of developed countries don't particularly know the source of their information, and in many cases don't particularly care. And I think it's very important for those of us in the communications field to want there to be more understanding of that, more appreciation of a professional news organization versus just someone who's kind of spouting off, or someone who's really disseminating misinformation. I think we have a vested interest in media literacy in that sense, and probably should be investing in it, not just as Ketchum, but as an industry.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and that's something that PR Week may well be able to play a convening role in and reflect in the content that we do.
That'd be great.
Listen, thanks for your time. It's great to chat to you. Frank, thanks for joining us as always. And don't forget the PR Week Awards, the big night in the PR calendar. That's in New York in about 3 weeks. And we're also setting up for our Brand Film Festival. That will be in the first week in May, and plenty of other things on the agenda. But that's all we've got time for. We'll see you next time on the PR Week.